coming up to 6:42. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie. Good morning to you.
Good morning, and it's time to go through the papers now. And joining us this morning is writer and journalist Emma Wolfe and co-founder of the Together Association, Alan Miller. Good morning to you both. Really good to have you both with us this morning. Emma, should we talk about the biggest story on the front of almost all of the papers this morning?
Yeah.
Of course, Philip Schofield.
Yeah, it is. It's across the papers, even the serious papers. And this is just, you know, not a good situation for Philip Schofield and those around him. I think what's coming out now is this just tissue of lies. I think that's what people are really starting to realise, not specifically whether this affair with a younger runner was, you know, if the man was of age, then there's nothing really that can be said about it. But the fact that Philip Schofield is now coming out and saying, look, I lied to ITV, I lied to my family, I lied to my lawyers, I lied to my agent. I think people are starting to feel very uncomfortable about the past few decades of this, you know, national, whatever we think of him, a national institution.
Why has he come out with this, do you think? Because the one thing he made clear was that it was all legal.
Yeah,
right?
Unwise, but
legal.
Yeah.
The fact he's lied to his wife, yes, it's not very nice.
Private issue.
But, you know, that's what happens when people have affairs.
Yeah.
And lots of people do it.
Yeah.
So why is it so big, do you think?
Well, it's been suggested that there is more to come, that, you know, that people are slightly pushed. It's very difficult to say, I know, to discuss this. I don't know the details. But, you know, do people just come out with this kind of statement? Would he just walk away from a very, very successful career with ITV? Unless there was some reason, and I'm not privy to that information, but this is what we know as of now.
Yeah, but you're smirking. Be careful.
Well, I'm not privy to any information, but I do think one of the things is that, on the one hand, I'm completely uninterested in what people do in their private lives. But the issue with this is that our private lives have become a spectacle in the public arena. So there are declarations in the public arena about people's choices and decision-making. And I think there's a lack of a distinction between the private sphere, where we keep things private and personal, and public. And actually, Philip Schofield has promoted that significantly. So in a way, this, you know, not ordinarily I'd be saying, well, I'm not really interested in people's private lives. If they haven't broken the law, which is something for the law to deal with, then there's nothing to do with us. But at the same time, we've had this situation where people wear their hearts on their sleeves in public and talk about their private lives. And I think particularly young people no longer have a distinction between the private sphere and the public. And if we don't have that, we don't actually have a really strong public arena or a place where we can have privacy and safety in a private sphere, and I think that's a problem.
And I think it's worth remembering that when he came out in quite an emotional, quite a no-holds-barred, you know, interview, if we think back to that, in 2020, he was, in a way, inviting us into his, you know, he was sharing a lot about himself, and if that was based on sort of semi-partial truths, I think then some of these questions become more valid. And staff at ITV are saying he lied point blank to everyone at every level. So there's a sense there that, you know, really there's a lot of stuff under the surface which just was not, you know, was not honest.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we shall wait and see what else rumbles on with that one, won't we?
Yeah.
Alan, let's have a look at The Guardian, should we? We're being told that the UK is set for a recession. We've been told this before, of course, and it didn't happen.
We have been told this before, and the front page of The Guardian is saying, is UK set for recession before the next election? Interesting headline. Although we do know that we've had severe sluggishness, we've had questions about whether people should eat or heat way before Ukraine. We know that the consequences and the damages and the harms of lockdowns and the impositions have meant that things like food prices and energy costs have been really high, and they're continuing to spiral. And now we're faced with a situation where interest rates have gone up again, twice actually in the last couple of weeks, and it looks like there'll be more. We know that Andrew Sentence is saying, who was someone who would be advising at the Bank of England, that it's folly actually to think that this can be prevented, because now we know the Bank of England is not actually guided or steered by politicians anymore since Gordon Brown unhinged that relationship. But what we're seeing is...
Andrew's sentence is a controversial character in and of himself.
Indeed, but what we're seeing is now a situation where perhaps many of the things that have been done before are just being repeated. We know that also since 2008, printing money hasn't been a resolution, and we've seen more of that in the lockdown. So now what we're faced with the situation, we've had low growth, low productivity. There were attempts to deal with that actually with Liz Truss, although many would argue she didn't win over the public to it. And now we're faced with the very same proposition that interest rates are going up. It's been said that Jeremy Hunt has said, well, that's just one of those things we'll have to put up with in order to get inflation down.
It's interesting.
This is such a farce. On Tuesday night, the IMF, in the FT, the IMF was saying the UK will avoid recession. We're talking about 0.4% instead of 0.3%. The fact of the matter is, people do not feel, yes, finally energy prices are coming down. That's not going to affect many of us over the summer. Food prices are still soaring. People do not feel that the UK is avoiding recession. They don't feel any richer. In fact, people are still struggling. It's such a kind of... How can they come out with this when we've just had this statement from the IMF saying that we'll avoid recession?
Well, I think the problem is the IMF should really butt out. Because the IMF has a litany of failures to its name.
So did the Bank of England, by the way.
Consistently.
Absolute failure. Years of failure.
Consistently got it wrong. But we have a major, enormous issue to deal with, because this is about everyday people's lives. And we have a situation where the level of wages in the UK, the level of productivity is not significantly increased. And actually, since the 70s, we've been sluggish. And it seems like the fashionable outlook is to have limits and restrictions to growth rather than to boost productivity and wealth creation for all. And really, this is, in terms of the medium and longer term, that's the thing we need to address, and we need to get out of this, because what this really is going to mean for people is more hardship and suffering.
OK, let's quickly move on. Just briefly in the Times, Emma, because we're a bit tight this morning. Bring more teachers in.
Yeah, it's a global search to fill our classrooms, because most of our teachers are on strike. So rules have been relaxed, so we can bring in people from countries such as Ghana, India, Singapore, and Nigeria.
So that'll increase that migrant.
Yeah, places like that. Exactly. This is a time with controversial, soaring immigration figures, but we desperately need teachers in science, maths, languages, all of that. Teaching unions are really angry at this, obviously, because the government is saying, no, by the way, we can't give you pay rises. Oh, but we'll offer a £10,000 bonus to woo teachers from abroad. But then again, we need our schools to function. We need teachers to be in post to teach our children.
Wouldn't it be better just to offer £10,000 to our own teachers?
I wonder if we have the teachers in science, maths and languages. I mean, it makes sense to bring in language teachers from abroad if they're teaching other languages, and we do have historical links with these countries.
But with science and maths teachers in particular, it's really, really difficult, because if you're a maths graduate, you could go into teaching and be on £26,000, for example, or you can go into the city and start on a 60k grad scheme. You can see why you wouldn't go into...
Same with science. You could probably go into a lab or something like that and be getting £100,000 a year to do something really interesting. Or you could deal with snotty-nosed, beloved children of ours in schools that are beset by shortages and, real budget.
No, you're selling it really well, Emma. Look, we've got to leave it there, I'm afraid. Emma, Alan, thank you. We'll catch up with you a little bit later on.